All right, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. We're doing this live and in person. You mostly know we do these through Zoom, but I got special guest star right here with me. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Paul Sargent. Paul, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Good travel over to Champaign today.
Well, you're always over here. So I just had to eventually, one point, just stop you and say, hey, man, let's get into the Bowerman room. Let's
That
get this thing recorded.
perfect. Perfect. Love it. Yeah.
So, every guest we have here, Paul, has a unique journey, a unique path that most of them end up in the coaching world, right? That's mostly who we talk to here on the Gill Athletics podcast. And no different for you. We're going to talk about your coaching background. But if, dear listener, if you've already seen the title here, you see after Paul's name, it's Sargent Distribution. So maybe you had questions about that. So we're going to talk about that as well. So as we go along the timeline, you'll kind of start seeing what Sargent Distribution is and what that means and how Paul has transitioned from coaching over to the private sector, if you will. So Paul, let's get started. Let's kind of get in our Wayback Machine. Are you a Marvel guy? Are you a comic book guy?
Somewhat. Yeah.
So I love like this new Spider-Man movie coming out in December.
Jacked.
I kind of am. I'm a, if you know me, I'm a cheapskate. I don't like going to the movie theater. I like waiting for it to come out. I might not be able to wait, man. It looks so cool, right?
Gotcha.
But my favorite part when I collected comic books was the origin story. How the
Yeah.
spider bit Peter and how Batman became Batman. Talk to us. Let's start. What is your origin story? How does track start with you?
So, grew up in a really small town that basically, everybody played basketball. I was way too small for football, so that never counted in. Basketball and baseball, that's what everybody did. And I was not blessed with athleticism. Played, but one of those last guys on the bench and that kind of stuff. Um, we had a elementary school, junior high, high school. So on the sixth grade field day, they did a mile and a half run, and I competed in that. The high school cross country and track coach showed up, and I found my niche. Like that was a good thing for me.
That
And
was an
so
automatic, like, oh, okay, hold on,
it
buddy.
was like
Let's come over here.
and I was tiny, so it was part of it was the body build and everything else too, but it just felt natural, and so he had a guy that was on the junior high team kind of just find me that summer and say, hey, you will be running cross country, right? I had honestly didn't know what cross country was, did not have a clue. Very grew up, very sheltered in a lot of ways, I think, and only had gone to basketball and football games at the high school. Never had seen anything else. So started with cross country, rolled straight into track, and then that just became who I still play basketball, and you and I have had this conversation. I love baseball, but my own talents were found in running for sure.
So what was high school career like for you? When you say distance running, were you more of like the 2-miler cross country
Definitely,
guy?
yeah. Not much wheels at
Not the
all.
half
No,
mile guy.
no, not much wheels at all. Although again, remember this was the cinder track days, so I'm not sure anybody had a whole lot of wheels and that kind of stuff back in the day. So
Yeah, I
um,
forget how old you
yeah,
are sometimes,
yeah.
Paul. Yeah,
Well,
good
and
point.
then Southern Indiana has its own unique little world of the country. So
Right.
my high school coach, who was also our athletic director, would pull me out of study hall to go out to the track to on non-meet days pull weeds and on meet days help line the track. So that was our
Didn't you have to with cinder tracks? Didn't you have to like almost like the drag mat for baseball? Didn't you almost have to like do
yeah
that with a
yeah.
cinder
So that
track
was
as
pretty
well?
much done by the time we get out there, and then we had this oh gosh, some Jimmy rig thing that like had wheels, but then had coffee cans sitting on it full of the chalk, and so you'd fill those coffee cans up, and that would make your lines. Which the straightaways weren't that bad, but the curves were horrendous. Like it was bad. Like it was. But that was our world. So every home meet, we had to reline the track, and yeah.
How you say every home meet you had to do that. So how much through the meet? So you're running back then where you running the 100 yards
Yeah,
and 220s
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't
but
remember
as you're
that.
running your 400s and 800s, 4x8s relays, how true do those lines stay throughout the meet? Like I feel like
The curves were terrible,
yeah,
because they were bad anyway. The straightaways weren't bad. Although again, like there's not a reunion that I go back to where someone in my class doesn't, point out the cinder in their hand from where they were.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
And then you got one of those hurdles out here, the flip up hurdles.
Hmm.
And when you bit it on one of those, it wasn't like you were just going to run through it. You were going to bite it. And then of course, when you land on the cinder, it doesn't stay in shape anymore. It kind of moves a lot. So
And I'm even thinking like officials and coaches, and even, we always have the random people
Yeah,
in the middle of the track as they're walking across the track. They're
Oh, yeah.
messing up the
Oh, yeah.
lines.
Oh, yeah. 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 So it was its
Wow.
own little world. But yeah, that was
And it was paint, not chalk.
no, it was chalk. Yeah. So it was,
Oh, it was
you put
chalk.
stuff in
Okay,
the
okay, okay.
coffee cans, and then you chalk the whole thing.
You said
and
coffee cans, and I was thinking paint
Yeah.
cans. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
That was the
Really?
way. That was the world. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
When did you get on your first, I'm gonna call it all weather track? I won't call it a real
Well,
track.
there were a couple schools in the area that, like when we went to the county capital, they had one, and it wasn't a good, but it was
But was it special? Was it
yeah.
like,
Oh, heck yeah. Like you felt like you're going to fly,
like this is the Olympics,
yeah,
baby?
yeah. Yeah. The weird part about my high school career is my fastest time in the mile came on a cinder track that was deep. And just one of those days where I felt good, apparently. But it was a day that it's not a
Wow.
track you should have been fast on,
Right.
but it just happened to be one of those days.
That
So
tells you how much,
yeah.
emotion and
Yeah.
a lot of other things play
Yeah.
into. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then we go down to, it's funny, I ran into a coach that, he was the coach when I was in middle school and high school, and he's still in the mix. Like he's 74 maybe now.
Wow.
And still he was working a cross country camp that I was down at, and talk about going to his place, because they had a really nice track, and they hosted some really cool meets. They had a relay type meet, which back then was, huge.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we got and it was, he also, I think, had maybe a freshman, sophomore race. So it was kind of nice. When I was a younger athlete, we had some really good upperclassmen. So I didn't really, cross is fun because I could be the number 7 guy as a freshman. But in track, if you're the number 7 distance guy, then you're relegated to, I pole vaulted my freshman year. So, yeah.
Do our pole vault people know that?
They would not care.
Yeah, you gotta be
trust me.
careful.
They
Okay,
would
all
not care.
right. You gotta be
And
careful.
this was
They'll
the
suck
day,
you in,
this
man.
was the days of straight pole with the triangle bent,
Oh, yeah.
thing, and then jumping into a wad of whatever,
Strips of foam.
strips of foam
if
with
you're lucky.
live animals living in it. While you landed, you'd hear the squeak of some dying animal or whatever. So yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
Now I've had a lot of people describe landing it. No one's ever talked about the
No,
squeak
you
of
would
the.
hear, you could hear the rabbit or whatever it was in there, just So yeah, yeah, yeah.
We've talked about
Even
it.
if you're only coming from 9 feet, it's enough to, yeah.
We've talked about it in the past. I don't know who came up with that triangle. Who thought the triangle idea for the crossbar was
Yeah.
like, hey, let's go triangle. We had circle steel back then and
Yeah,
aluminum.
yeah.
Why did we settle on
I
the
wish
triangle?
I wish I had one of those. Like I did. Before we built our facility at the college I coached at, we shared a facility with the middle school, and they had an old one in there. And so anytime somebody complained, I pull that thing out and say,
Yeah.
"You really want to complain? Because this is what it could be."
Right.
And
They have old school days.
But you'd still like to have some of those around, just a reminder.
Yeah.
And it's funny, young coaches are like, "You have what?" Like,
Yeah.
they have no clue.
All right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So as you were going through your high school career, what was your thought towards college and running and things like that?
Well, I knew that could be part of it. My high school coach, my main high school coach, left after my sophomore year of high school. Actually moved to Franklin, Indiana, and so they're good friends of our family. So journeyed up there, kind of looked at the school, and then I had some high school teachers who were also from small schools, and really realized that the small school was a better fit for me. My mom was an IU grad and was adamant about, for me, just my personality, to be a name, not a number. Not and I use a great school, but for me personally, it just need to be that. So I knew that the small school atmosphere was going to be part of it, and knew that athletics would, that running would be part of it as well. So narrowed down to 2 schools, and Franklin's the one I chose. And then just kind of moved into town and never left, basically. So yeah.
I don't think I knew you went to school there.
Yeah, I'm an
because
alumnus.
I'm a huge, like, I've had past guest, but even with just normal day-to-day conversations, I have a huge part of my heart for coaches who coach at their alma mater.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's always like when you recruit and you tell a recruit how awesome your school is, it's like, well, how, like, let me give you the best proof I can. I went to school here. Like,
Yeah.
You're not coaching another school telling how great. It's like, yeah, I went to school here. That's how awesome
Yeah.
the school is. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Franklin was home.
So you go to Franklin. When you go to Franklin, what are you majoring in? What are you thinking at that point for career wise?
So I had kind of a life-changing experience right before my senior year of high school, and I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I had chose early. Back then, you don't see them as much anymore, but they had things called outstanding junior scholarships. And so you could get a very good academic scholarship off your junior year scores. And so I had originally picked Franklin because it was a good science school. and thought I was going to be a veterinarian. That's kind of what I thought my love was going to be. And then had some things go on in life that kind of switched things around. So I went to Franklin, not the school you'd pick for this necessarily, but that's just what opened up. I was a religion major because I want to be a youth pastor.
Yeah.
And then my mom was worried that wouldn't work out. So I had to pick up sociology as a double major in case I did something else. So like you're going to do a lot with either one of those.
I was about to say the social,
Yeah.
I see more in the religious studies than the sociology.
So,
Sorry for
yeah,
all you
so
sociology
I was
majors.
a double major in religion and sociology.
Huh.
Yeah.
So was coaching at all in your
No.
thought process?
No, and it's funny, it's one of those things you look back now. I did a lot of coaching, like I even when I was, because I played high school ball up through my junior year and so on teams that I couldn't play, like if I was part of a club, like an organization, whether it was Boy Scouts or DMLA or whatever it might be, I couldn't play, but they had these tournaments, so I would coach. And then as when I was doing youth pastor stuff, same kind of scenario. Like you're a coach in a lot of different ways. But no, I didn't have a thought in the world about coaching.
You just thought about youth pastor or a sociology teacher.
I was not thinking about social at all. That was just making my mom happy so that she could pay for college. So that's kind of where that went. So yes.
So talk to us about the coaches you had at Franklin.
So I came in, I grew up where we ran on the road, like a blacktop road once a year. The rest of the time we were on gravel roads. And so I'd never run on any kind of pavement before. Came to Franklin. I remember the first week we did an 8-mile run on the pavement and my knee swelled up like there was no tomorrow.
Oh, right.
So I started that trend of being hurt. And so so my first 2 years that I ran cross country, I just couldn't stay healthy. It had really bad IT band tendonitis. Athletic training has changed a lot, from then. So I actually quit after my sophomore year. Went to a sports medicine place. They said you can run in pain or you can quit. I'm like, it's not worth it.
Wow.
Missed it a bunch. Came out for track. We really didn't have a track team at Franklin, but they were starting to get some things going on. So I came out for track my junior year. It was a thrower, another thrower, a sprinter, and me. That was the team.
The track team?
The track team, right.
Where's the rest of the cross country boys and girls?
Nobody ran track. Nobody ran track. It wasn't the way it worked.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was assistant football coach. So most of my practices consisted of, we do 20 minutes of some kind of plyometric type work. And then he'd say, go out and run. So needless to say, I was not very good because there was no training and I didn't know enough of my own. And so the whole thing sprung up, hurt again. Senior year, Franklin actually brought in a coach who knew what they were doing. And by then I was removed enough from it that I was just like, I didn't miss it that much.
Yeah.
So not much of a college career.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird background. So.
Not much of a college career, but a pretty fitful one. You're like, okay, I'm in it. Now I'm getting hurt. Okay, I'm out. All right, I'll come back in. There seems to be no real organization for track and field here. I'm back out. Yeah, that's a pretty frustrating maybe.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And then, again, had a guy that kind of came in, again, my senior year came in and kind of put some things in place. They started fielding teams. They talked to me to go out for track. Track began to grow a little bit. So my senior year, and then I actually came back and worked for the college the next 2 years in like a grad assistant program. And that, got to see, I had RAs that worked for me and that were part of the track team and supportive of that. So it was around it, but we didn't have a facility, it was a
not even cinder.
It was, but it was a cinder, more of a, like around the football field. And then football field corners up against the railroad tracks. So it kind of had a flat line and it wasn't like they did everything without having a facility, basically. And we're fortunate that the city of Franklin has like the old high school. What I've always been told was that was the first all surface material, the first one in the state was at Franklin Community High School.
Oh, wow.
Way back in the day. Don't know if that's completely accurate,
right.
But that's what I've always been told. And so we were fortunate to have some decent places to train. And then of course, my old high school coach was the coach there. So, he was and he's a Franklin alum as well. So more than happy to let the college guys get on there and do what they need to do. Guys and gals.
I know you grew up a big baseball fan. Were you a track fan though? Like was the frustration, was there frustration also that, man, I want to do the thing that I get to see my heroes do?
Yeah. So you take it back. I remember I was let's see, my freshman or sophomore year of high school, and we had a local business guy. He owned the Odin Clothing Company. So, and he came to one of our practices. He was an avid runner. Came to one of our practices and said, "If you want to be good at this sport, you need to be a junkie, and so you need to read everything you can." And so he goes, "If you really want to do this, raise your hand. I'll take down your name and address, and I'll pay for a subscription to Runner's World." Back when Runner's World was still, the running magazine.
Yeah.
So I became a junkie, and was passionate. I tell people it's kind of funny. You can't judge me for this, but as a young person, my national hero was Salazar. Like
Yeah.
Salazar
Okay.
was the man.
Sure. Sure.
But
That
then
makes a
there,
lot of sense back then.
yeah,
Now
I
we
mean, oh, it was
know
huge.
different things,
whole
maybe,
different
but
thing.
yeah, sure. He
And
was a
then,
hero back then,
yeah.
right?
And then my local hero, there was a guy out of Heritage Hills High School by the name of Terry Brom.
Okay.
And Terry went on to run at IU, became a Olympian back in the day. And then crazy enough, I got to be part of a cross country camp that he started down in Southern Indiana for, oh gosh, I think they did it for 20 years. And I was, or maybe not maybe that long, but I was part of it for most of that time, so.
So you're talking about, great Indiana legends, specifically in distance running. So you're reaching with my history here. However, the great
Sam
Bobby,
Bell, though.
of course, Sam Bell. Yeah, of course. But the great Bobby Kennedy was from Indiana,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where was he in your range?
So he would have been like, actually about the time he would have been a little bit behind me in school.
Okay. Oh, so he wasn't even, he wasn't even Bob Kennedy at that point.
No.
Wow.
So Terry would have been about 3 or 4 years older than me.
Okay.
So Terry was like the local guy. He was a weird story out of Southern Indiana. Played football all up until his senior year of high school, and then ran cross. But he was a very stud track athlete. So Sam recruited him to IU. He ends up going to IU. Ends up being the U.S. champion in the 5K.
Wow.
Won actually on the old Carroll Stadium IUPUI track.
Oh
in front
yeah.
of, in front of family and friends back in the day.
What a great
And then
track.
like he was on the Olympic team with Brian Deemer, Calvin's coach, steeplechase guy.
Okay.
And so
Oh
pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So so that was, and so those are my guys. Those were the heroes. And so maintain a junkie, but if you were, that was really before the time of Indianapolis taking off as a track mecca. There was that time in the 80s where it became a mecca, and really early 90s, I guess. And that was almost a little bit before that time. It was just kind of coming around to where, Carroll Stadium was built. I ran on it my junior year. It was, I want to say it was fairly new then at that point in time.
So where was coaching college track at all in your life at all? Yeah. So what'd you do instead?
So I well, I got married. That was kind of a quirky one.
Knowing your wife, that was a good thing.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So it was one of those scenarios where it just seemed like the right time. And so I literally I graduated college one weekend, got married the next weekend. My wife still had another year of school left. So we knew we were coming back to Franklin, had no clue what I was going to do.
Was she a track person at all?
No.
Not at all. Like not even like I did in high school.
No.
More like, why do you even mess around with it?
Played volleyball, and then, but very big into music. Like she's a wonderful voice, and thank goodness my kids have that side, not my side in that world.
Yeah. Hey, we're not doing any singing on the podcast.
No, this is not. You know what you want to. There's no. When you had Eric Kramer on here, you can do all.
I
that,
know.
You can do all that you want, but
that's
not my world. I might just sit and watch him. That's fine with me. But yeah, so I came back to college and did. They had a grad program where you could get your basically grad classes paid for. And I worked intramurals and housing. So I was in charge of half the housing and then did the whole intramural program at the college.
Is this what you were thinking for career at this point?
No, I still thought I'd be a youth pastor.
Okay. All right. Yep.
And so I was volunteering at a local church, and it was working out well. And then got done with those 2 years. Really, honestly, I had no clue what I was going to do. And the church came and said, "Hey, we came in some money. We'll take you on for a year and see if we can make it work." And so I started doing that. And became a full-time youth pastor.
A lot of parallels between youth pastor and coach.
And there are, it's one of those things you look back later on. I was going to hit on this a different time, but this is a good window. My father passed away when I was 11. So my coaches were definitely my father figures, no questions asked, all the way through. And I youth pastored that way as well. Like I related to the kid that was rough around the edges because they need a kick in the pants every now and then. I related to that kid. But yeah, so started at the church and still was very involved at the college. I there's a bunch of alumni that play basketball at lunch, and I went over and played with those guys and hung out, met people and stuff. That's how I kind of fell into coaching, actually. So, yeah.
So tell me more about that. How did that
So
lead to coaching
the
track?
athletic director was walking through the gym, and he and I are from the same area of the state, so he knew me. Plus, when I was intramural supervisor, we had an auxiliary gym that we did 99% of our stuff at. But every now and then, I would get the luxury of coming to the varsity gym, and I'd have to go through him to use for a tournament, or whether it be volleyball or basketball or whatever. But I have to go through him because he was also the athletic director. And he came walking through and said, "Hey, come see me when you're done." All right. So I go up to his office, and
Was this kind of like a seeing the principal thing, or
well, I didn't know. Like, again, I knew him because he was our athletic director, and I had to go to him, but I didn't know him that well.
so there wasn't like an
necessarily.
automatic like, oh, I'm in trouble. It was just like,
No,
oh,
no,
okay,
it
he
was
wants
just
to
one of
see
those
me
like,
for
this is
something.
weird,
Yeah.
So I went to his office, and he, I can remember his line clear as day. He said, you've done pretty well for a Southern Indiana kid. You're pretty
Okay.
well rounded. He said, but the one thing you're missing is coaching. And he was the basketball coach, and I was coaching some youth teams in town at that point in time. And I thought, not because I wanted to coach, but because it's what youth pastors did.
Right.
You did these church teams or whatever. And I was like, yeah, basketball. Okay, here we go. And he said, our cross country coach just resigned. Can you do it?
Oh, hold up. So
I was
you
thinking
thought,
basketball. Heck yeah.
oh, help out with the
Yeah.
basketball
Yeah.
team.
I thought I could be a statistician, because I was a junkie. I lived sports. That's kind of what
So as you're on the edge of your seat, like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm
yeah.
about to say yes in a heartbeat, and kind of that record scratch,
Yeah.
cross country
Cross
coach.
country, I'm
What
sorry.
did you think?
I didn't know what to think. I thought, huh. And again,
That's not basketball.
it's not. But I always have been drawn to the college age, just thought that was an age. So I thought, okay, well, I said, I'll go back and ask my church, see what they think. And they gave me the green light to pursue it.
In
So
just cross country.
just cross country
So
at that
this
point
is
in
not
time.
a full-time position.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
No,
right.
no. In fact, the college did not have full-time cross country or track. Like the track coach was a football coach. Actually, I think the track coach at that point in time was an intern. So he was intern football, but then they just threw some extra money to be the track coach. But again, the guy, that was the same guy that was there my senior year. And it was one of those things. It's kind of funny how things go circle, but basically what happened is the track team continued to be five guys, or whatever, even less than that at times, but we're funded, and so the college kind of came back and said, okay, we need to cut some corners here. Where do we cut corners? We're going to cut track, And so as it got written up, even though cross country had decent numbers, it got written up, not just track, but cross country / track and field.
Oh.
So the cross country coach said, yeah, well, obviously I don't have a job now. So he pursued somewhere else, even though they backtracked it. The conference then came back and said, you know what, you're a founding member of this conference, and we expect you to keep cross country and track. So then they realized they had to keep it.
Thank you, conference.
And so it was the second week of August, I get hired as a cross country coach. So no recruiting, no anything, just pick up the team with what we had. And we had 3 guys because a lot of them had left because they didn't think we were
because you got cut. Right. Yeah.
So we had 3 guys, a senior and 2 juniors, and no women at all, and just picked up and started doing things.
So what was that like? I mean, it's one thing, your first coaching job, and you're staring at 20 to 40 team members, and there's a schedule laid out. Here you are. It's like, all right, guys, the 3 people in front of me.
I remember sitting at home and calling these guys and saying, okay, are you coming back to school?
Do I even have those 3?
Yeah,
right.
Are you coming back to school, and are you going to run? Because there was a couple guys that were on campus, but it said, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then it was getting the admissions list and starting to call people and saying, okay, like I remember one guy I called and I said, hey, I know your name. I said, you went to this high school, and I'm familiar. That's my neck of the woods, and I know who you are. And have you thought about? I know you're coming in for basketball, but have you thought about maybe doing some running or whatever? And he said, Coach, do you know anything about me? And I said, well, yeah, like I said, I know. He goes, well, did you see my graduation year? And I didn't pay attention. And I said, oh, so you've been out for a little bit. And he goes, yeah, I got out of school and went to play D1 basketball. It didn't work out. He goes, I'm 40 pounds heavier than I was in high school. So I probably shouldn't be doing any kind of cross country running right now. Ironically enough, he did run his freshman year our conference meet, so we could field a team. So that's the way it turned out. I got 3 freshman guys off the basketball team to run a conference meet. So yeah.
So you didn't just let the 3 guys like, okay, this is it. I'm just gonna, like, you hustled. You went and called in. So,
yeah. So then the next year we started doing the recruiting process, and Again, it's the funny how it works out. We fielded a full team on the guys side after that. I mean, it wasn't a good team. I think my number 7 runner also threw discus for me. So that tells you later down the road, that tells you how we were.
That is never, I can't think of a single time that has ever been a good sign.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh yeah, he also throws disc. Ooh.
yeah. You see, we laugh about that a lot when we run into each other. And then I thought we recruited a full women's team, and that was the same year that Franklin decided to start women's soccer as well. And the soccer coach was working as well, saying, hey, and it was okay. I can run every day, or I can play soccer every day.
Right.
Soccer's equally as hard, but it's definitely more exciting, I think, in that way, especially that point in time. So 4 of the 5 girls said, I'm going to play soccer. And so we brought in one young woman to, so we were scheduled to go to this cross country camp. And so she got her own cabin. She got it, she was very much taken care of. So yeah.
Wow. So you did cross country that first year. Did you do track?
Didn't do anything with track.
So you just recruited for cross, get ready for the next season.
Had a track coach. And then the next year, so I've been 94. And the next year, then one of the guys that was a junior was a really good half miler, and he's like, I need some structure in what we're doing. So I kind of wrote the distance workouts for him, but I was taking grad classes at the time and wasn't part of that.
Right.
I took him to one meet, I think, because he was a business major and had to take like what test it was, one of those crazy business tests you take in the spring, and he knew he was going to miss the bus, and so I took him to the meet, and then the next year, the college made a commitment to bring in a guy that was football and track. So then I became his assistant coach in the spring. Still all part-time, just doing that. And
so pause there for a second. So you've got a couple of cross country seasons under your belt there, rough ones, but any startup program is going to be rough. If not, you're just hit the lottery basically. And now you got a full-time head coach coming in for track that you're going to be the assistant for. Where is coaching as a profession, coaching track and field as a profession in your life at that point? Are you like, oh yeah, this is where I'm going to go? Or was this still like, I'm feeling out my life on
it was still
an
extra, so my responsibilities at the church were youth, children, and college. And that was kind of the order that it was. It was youth, children, and college. And then it was a very young church. So the order kind of ended up getting flipped around to where it had to be children. Not that I taught, but it was more organized in all the classes and the nurseries and all that kind of stuff. It was children, youth, and then if I had time left over, it was college. What I found in those first few years that I was really starting to miss, I needed more time with college students, and that's really where my calling was at.
That's where your passion, your calling.
Right, right. And so begin to look for options that would allow me to coach, but then, and the college had no interest of a full-time coach. That just wasn't where they were at. No. And so to try to find, I begin to look for options of, where would that look? So looked into starting a running store. There was all kinds of, things that now I look back on and go, those were business experiences that I got that I end up down the road,
Right.
But you don't get to see the big picture very often, but I always think back, and I've had so many coaches that have come through. We started an internship fairly early with the college, and coaches that came through, and you almost feel guilty because they, it's not an easy trade to get into, and for me, I fell into it, and fell into every part of it, and so I whenever they'd say, how'd you get, no, you don't want to know. Like, I just lucked into it, guy. I mean, if you're a young coach, you're beating the bushes, you're trying to find the right fit, and sometimes taking a job that's not a right fit.
Right.
And I just happened to fall into my alma mater and a community I was already living in and comfortable with, and
huge, right? Support system. Where were you? I'm gonna call it like mentorship for other mentorship from other coaches.
Correct.
Was there any coach that was like your speed dial?
When I first speed dial, that would require like a phone.
I didn't say text. I knew we weren't there.
I had an office. So when Franklin had decided to cut cross country and track, the story that I was told was that there were our AD had gone to the coaches meeting to say, hey, we're not going to have this, and a couple of coaches in the conference were very adamant about the importance of cross country and track at a college. Those were the two coaches that reached out to me. One in particular, very early on, kind of said, okay, are you going to do, Franklin, is one of those schools, and a lot of Division III schools at the time, not just Division III, small schools, where you're rotating through, a coach every year, coach every other year. And he
Right.
says, okay, are you going to be here for a while?
Right.
So if you are, here's the way to do it. So Larry Maddox at Anderson University was
Yeah.
when I got in my ear very early on.
I was gonna say I didn't know that early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then Rob Johnson at Wabash was another one that was in my ear. And then later on, as I kind of got into it, Scott Fangman at University of Annapolis. So those are my three college coaches. And then my old high school coach again was local. And so when again, I didn't know why we did things when I was a high school athlete, So as soon as I got hired, I bought books and I started reading, and I'm like, oh, Coach Hall did that. Coach Hall did that. Coach Hall did that. Was I just ignorant? Which I probably was just stupid and cocky, and you know how that goes as a 15, 16-year-old kid. But then he was always there to bounce ideas off. What do you think about this, Coach? And again, as a Franklin alum, he also knew the college and knew what we'd get away with and what recruiting looked like.
What would work, what wouldn't work.
Yep. And so, those were the folks that early on, especially were, Paul, and again, we were terrible. I mean, no questions asked, and here we had, Wabash was one of the top teams in the country. Anderson was one of the top teams around. And so I had some guys that really, that came in, and then I had some guys that were, came in about the same time I did as well. So we could kind of cut our teeth together, which was good. So,
do you remember out of all those books and different media that you would consume, do you remember a book that really kind of stood out?
The one that came in, well, anything from Bowerman was key, that was big. And then later would have been the Jack Daniels stuff. That was a key one for me. That kind of made sense to me. It clicked. And especially for a part-time coach without resources, and that's, he was at SUNY Cortland. He wasn't part-time, but he was lacking resources, at a Division III school, although probably more than most of us had. But still, was doing it with all the ins and outs of being a professor and all that kind of stuff. You just don't have the time. And so to be able to have a formula that you could work off of was awesome.
I wish, there was a way to calculate the number of coaches positively influenced by certain aspects and other coaches for sure. But, Jack Daniels' books gets brought up all the time for distance coaches that are like, oh, and a lot of what you just said there too, that same sentiment of it made sense. So you read some books and it's like, okay, I know that I should be picking up some stuff, but I don't know how I would integrate that into my program. The Jack Daniels books, everybody's like, oh, that made sense. Like, oh, okay, I can see how I can immediately put that into my team and start seeing results.
Correct.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. And you named some Mount Rushmore people there, by the way, Larry Maddox, Rob Johnson, good Lord Fangman. I mean, that's amazing that you'd have that kind of support system. Yeah. So where do we go here? I mean, you're a part-time assistant track coach, you're a part-time head cross country coach, you're doing children and college kids last, and where does this go? How do you get there?
It was exhausting.
Oh, yeah, you're married. Yeah.
Exhausting.
You have a life, right?
So really said something. In my first year of coaching, my daughter was born. So
you are exhausted.
Yeah, so my kids knew nothing other than being again, my wife was not a cross country athlete, but she shreked, and she was at every meet and helped them plan the home meets and that kind of stuff. And
so you're hosting meets there.
We within a couple of years.
That's I mean, just as the program is really young at that point and not a lot of participants, hosting meets though, was that a decision you made, or was it a legacy?
Oh, no, we had Franklin hosted some meets. There really wasn't a place that at the time that was, like when I was in college, we hosted out by the golf course, and it wasn't ideal. When we start traveling and then realized that travel was intense, and especially like for us, the opening weekend, Labor Day weekend, historically Franklin has hosted now. So I started that way back in the day, but it was tough to find a meet that weekend, and we were traveling 3 hours, and that's tough.
Sure.
The local horse park, the high school coaches kind of adopted that and said that we're going to, this is going to be our home. So it was the only course in Johnson County for the longest time, the county that the school's in. And all the high schools hosted there. And so we just kind of jumped in there and said, okay, the 5K course is set. So now we just have to find 8K. And so we could, and it was big enough to pull it off. So we had some neat stuff there.
So you obviously get some benefit of like, okay, here's one weekend. We don't have to travel 3 hours to, maybe there's some financial savings of hosting versus traveling. Was there any recruiting positivity to that?
No, not real. I mean, because it was local, that'd be the one thing. We were at the horse park. And so you could say, It was fast. It was a fast course. And you know, you go back to old people in Franklin and or old people in Johnson County and say, oh yeah, horse park, Johnson County Horse Park, you know. Kind of people talk about Notre Dame and stuff now, you know, or Louisville, you know, fast places. So they only because they could compare things. They could look at it and go, okay, this is I've been on this course before. They ran this. This is where I would mix in with these kind of schools, you know. And it was, you know, it was fun. It was people that were family, you know, like, you know, I did a lot with Vincent's back in the day. You know, they would come over. Oakland City would come up. We would used to do this silly little dual meet with Oakland City, where we go down there on a Tuesday or something, you know, and run at Pride's Creek, which was a ridiculously hard course. You know, now they're back and they're, you know, they got new coaches and it's fun watching them come back. You know, they're not around as much anymore, you know. But yeah, so you form some good friendships in that of people that were doing the same thing I was, you know, trying to get started. You know, Chris Gaffner at Vincent's, you know, so he and I, you know, were kind of cutting teeth together and, you know, looking for the same things over Ron Combs over at Wilmington. Came in, I think Ron told me this is 20th year. So he came in not too long after I was getting going. So, you know, we're looking for the same things, you know, trying to grow. And then Wilmington was in our conference for a while. So, you know, we around him a lot, which was great. Yeah, just cutting teeth. And our area was so tough that you needed to find the people that were with you because, you know, you had, you know, DePaul was ranked, Wabash was ranked, Anderson was ranked. Rose Holman, weirdly enough, was not a powerhouse yet, but would be soon, you know, so we were in our state. Then you had IU was incredible, you know, USI was incredible, University of Annapolis was terrible. It was incredible, you know, had all these great schools. And if you were trying to get started,
big
you were
uphill.
getting handed to you all the time, you know, all the time. So you had to kind of figure out how to make that work. But,
so, you know, spoiler alert, we know you become the head track coach of Franklin and you have like a full-fledged program. Take us through that sequence. Where did it go from where you are at that point?
You know, so I really realized that I wanted to coach and try to figure out how to put that together. So
now it's flipped in your head, like, oh, okay, this is my profession.
I want to coach.
What do you remember? Was there a conversation with another coach? Was there a recruit that you signed? What was it that was like, okay, I'm a youth pastor who coaches, that flips to I'm a track coach?
It was just the environment. You know, I mean, like it just felt like home, you know, much like when I chose Franklin, you know, okay, this feels like home. Not being around it, you know, not being around the environment, you know, team camps, you know, hanging out, and then just the college students are unique.
You know? You mentioned that early, like you kind of bended towards 18 to 22-year-olds
they're
early.
Just a unique group, and you can be more free, I think, with a college student. You know, the 18 to 22 or whatever it might be. They have different needs. I think you're sorting life out more from that age, and to be a part of that was awesome.
And they're still very moldable to mentors and leaders.
You couldn't pick a better group for my kids. You know, I mean, like, you know, they were family, you know, extended family, you know, in a lot of ways. So, yeah, so I knew that I wanted to do something different. Had explored starting a running specialty store. I went down and met with Swag Hartel down in Louisville, Kentucky. The Southern folks will know Swag well. He's a legend down in that world. While I was trying to figure out how to finance $1 million to start a store opened up on the South Side, and so my name got out. So they hired me as the manager of the store. And they gave me the freedom to say, you can leave at, you know, 3:00 every day and go down and practice. And then you can be off on Saturdays. So that you can go to meets. Then I would work on Sundays so that I could, you know, make up for my Saturday being off.
So Paul, how many years have you and I known each other now?
Well, how many years you been?
I've been here 15.
So
it was fairly soon, right after.
Yeah.
And, you know you very well, consider you a friend, not just co-worker, you know, worker and things like that, or, you know, teammates. Never knew you worked at a running shoe store. This is what I love about these things. You always learn something new about people, even people you know fairly well.
Yeah, managed a store on the south side of Indy for almost 3 years.
Wow.
And yeah, it was good. I mean, it was a good experience, and really enjoyed it, you know.
Probably, I assume you learned more about like footwear and stuff at that point, right?
And then to meet people, you know, like that was right when Brooks was starting to do team wear. So we became a Brooks school, you know, at that point in time, because you know, because they would give me stuff for free.
Right. So it always helps.
You know, and then you know, to have the teams come in on the south side there. So we had, you know, a lot of
Do like
local.
shoe fittings
Oh
and
yeah,
things like
all that kind
that?
of stuff.
Did you
Yeah.
guys do like, I know it's popular now and has been maybe for a while, and I don't know how I know this because it's not like I participate in these, but these really popular running stores will do like group runs and
Oh
things
yeah,
like that. Do
yeah.
you
And
do all
it
that?
was a bike shop that decided to do running. So
Interesting.
we had our own little quirky niche in there. And so it was already kind of set up that rides were coming out of there. So then runs started coming out of there. And then we were partnered with or paralleled with a local timing company. And so like all his people came in there. He did in Indianapolis, the mini marathon is
Oh,
humongous.
huge. Yeah.
And so he had a training program. So all his people came through there for that. And we took care of those folks. And then we're sponsors of races and
Yeah, all
that
the
kind of stuff,
5Ks and
And so
10Ks,
summers
right?
were equally busy
Oh,
with doing all that kind of
sure.
stuff, which paralleled greatly with recruiting. That was
Right.
awesome for me because I'm going all these summer races and I'm there.
You're staring at the 15, 16, 17 year
Heck
age
yeah, I
group
am.
results.
Heck yeah, I am. And these kids are coming up and they know me from that world. They're coming to get their, their fittings for the shoes,
Right.
which worked out well. And did that until honestly, the shoe store was doing really, really well. And it was one of those where I just like, I couldn't leave at 3. Like we're too busy. And so I just said, I can't do this. And so left and did and at the local Parks and Rec. They had an opening. The benefits were phenomenal because it was city, and the hours worked out perfect. Although I worked basically third shift, so I would go in at 6 o'clock at night and work till, or no, 8 o'clock at night, work till 6 in the morning, and then I would get off, go sleep for a couple hours, then go to college. And it was one where I could actually be at the college during the day, which I could never do before. So I could recruit, and it did that for about a year and a half until my body was like, this is nuts. Like, I mean, you think about, you're sleeping during the day until you've got a cross country meet on Saturday. And then you try to go to church with your family on Sunday. And then you got to turn around that night and go to work. And it just, I remember I reached a point where I was done. I was like, I'm done.
Have we ever talked that I did that?
No.
Yeah,
Really?
11 at night till 7 in the morning. I'd work in security at the Palmer House Hilton so I could coach De La Salle.
And there were parts of it I loved.
Man,
I mean,
I don't know if there was any parts I loved. It
well,
messes with your body.
It does. But there
Yeah.
were, I could still get stuff done. I got breaks while I was there that I could work out, which was awesome. My kids used to love, like, if it was like if they had a day off, I'd bring them in and they could play in the gym or whatever. And they gave me the freedom to do that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And the city parks departments was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, they are just good people.
Tough.
So got to, and then again, the benefits, insurance and days off, you get, basically, if you're a government employee, you get, sorry, I don't offend anybody, but like you want to think it might be a holiday, then you get that day off. It's one of those. So I had plenty of days off to be able to do things. And then again, it worked with, for the first time ever, being at the college during the day. So you can imagine trying to recruit when you have visitors come on campus during the day.
Right.
And I could be
You're at the store. Right.
Yeah. So and that's when we started our intern program to have our interns available during the day so they could do all that. But you're at the mercy of someone else recruiting.
So this was an internship for other coaches, like for young.
Yeah. So like a young coach would come in, so they would get, housing and they get free room and board.
Where did that come from? Because that's not the most common thing in the world.
The college realized that they had no money. That's it. But they had bought up some of these houses around campus and said, okay, we got these houses, board really is not that much. So what if we bail some things out? So what if we, and it wasn't just our sport, football, basketball, everybody had the option of having this intern and they got like $2,000. They could take classes, which enabled them, if you had like a student loan, if you start taking classes, you could delay your student loan. So they could take classes to finish a major or do whatever they want to do. And then they coached. And it was a great way to get your foot in the door. For some, I remember like the number of, specifically the ones I remember, basketball that came through. And they thought basketball coaching was X's and O's. And then there was, you have to do a lot of other crap.
Right.
And they realized it's not what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
I had some really good ones come through. I think about that all the time. I was so fortunate to have just a whole string of incredible interns. And then we had, like when we started hiring our part-time lay people to come in and coach, I just had some extremely good ones. Like people always ask me, what can't you coach? And you'll find this, I can't coach hurdles.
Really?
I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, I would, just because I've been around it.
Sure. Yeah. But give yourself a little bit more credit than that.
I always had a hurdle coach.
Huh.
and I always had a good one.
All right.
So I didn't have to do anything with hurdles. Like I'm like, yep, go see Coach
Yeah.
Kokemeyer, go see Coach Bailey, go see Coach Kramer.
All right.
You know, I mean, I was spoiled. You know, that's the one. Like I just never. Everything else in track, I probably coached at some point in time, but hurdles, no, I always have one.
Go back to that example you talked about with some basketball coaches, interns that came in and they thought, oh yeah, it's on the court and it's, you know, the forward goes here and the center does this. Talking over my head because I don't know basketball. Did you find that same thing in parallel with track coaches coming in for internship where they thought it was every day in the sand pit, but then they realized their scheduling and housing and
yeah, but very few that would say it's not worth it. You know, it's funny in our world. I did have more alums that would leave and they'd be like, oh, like I remember one girl told me, you know, she graduates from Franklin and she starts coaching and a girl misses a morning practice and she comes the next morning and she's like, okay, I'm a new coach. I want to establish myself here. I'm gonna let her know, you know, say, hey, you missed practice yesterday, didn't communicate. Yeah, my dad died.
crickets. Oops.
Yeah, and the girl just weeps on her. And this girl was a non-emotional girl. There wasn't a hugger or anything. And she's got this, you know, little girl just weeping on her. And I remember her calling me and goes, Coach, like this is real stuff. I'm like, yeah, it is. And I told her, I said, 75% of coaching is that. It's life. Then you got this 25%, or maybe not, and then you got the academic part, which is another huge part of it. And then you got this little sliver that we get that's actually the X's and O's.
When you actually step on the track and write the workout.
Run hard, turn left. You know, right. I mean, you know, it's you know, it's such a small part of it. I think, you know, I would say probably when I first started coaching, that was more so at a smaller school, and now I think it's across the board. Like there's a lot of life with young kids.
Well, that story that you mentioned with the coach, it's a great lesson about, you know, we're all going through something. I saw a tweet the other day. It was talking about like, we're all making it up as we go along. Like no one has this life figured out part, right? Yeah. So whether you're just starting, you're a high schooler or an 18-year-old, or you're a 70-year-old retired, you're trying to figure out what retirement means, right? So like, we're all going through stuff. I love that story of like, you know, she's like, all right, I'm gonna establish myself. I'm a coach. And it's like, where were you? And it's like, yeah, you're about to find out the floodgates are going to happen. She had real life happen. Yeah. Dad passed away, right? Yeah. We're all going through something. We got to be more, I don't want to say she wasn't uncompassionate. It's not even a word. Just wasn't she didn't throw a lack. She wasn't prepared. Like, oh, she was thinking, oh, she probably slept in or partied or another million other excuses that didn't matter. And here was the real excuse that it did matter. Exactly. You know, and I again, when you can look back on the big picture things, you know, one of the women's athletic director at the college very early on said, Paul, you need to have something to hang your hat on. So you need to come up with something that's just you. Like it's not necessarily something that is that exemplifies your team, but it's who you are. And so, you know, I thought through my, you know, and you know, when you're a youth pastor, you go to all these clinics and conferences and, you know, that kind of stuff. And then it just started going to a few of those college ones. So my mantra in coaching was teaching life lessons through the avenue of athletics. And I would that is a very youth pastor it is, isn't it? Type of statement for track. I love it. But you think about, you know, I would much rather a kid learn, you know, how to fail because they false started than how to fail when they're newly married, you know, or, I mean, and again, that's an exaggeration. When the stakes are lower, you know, and you know, you're an athlete and you're a coach. The parallels are awesome, you know, but it's a safer environment to make a mistake in, right? Especially in our world, I think. Like we're not sitting out with, you know, 4,000 people in the stands and yelling at us because we, you know, fumble football. Right. You know, our world's a little different. And it is much safer overall. Yeah. Well, it's a great point, right? I mean, fail when the stakes are low, you false start. That may be the world's worst thing for you today, right then and there. But you're about to go through life where there's going to be a lot bigger mistakes and decisions, et cetera, from marriage, parenthood, et cetera, right? Jobs. And the flip side, the success as well. You know, how to handle success, how to handle a teammate, how to handle, you know, I think one of the biggest ones is when you know, I'm the number one runner as a sophomore, but then coach does his job. And next thing you know, I'm a number 3 runner as a senior and I'm running better times. You know, how do you deal with that? You know, how do you handle that? See, I never had to worry about that. I was always the last runner. So even if we had great people join, I was like, oh, I'm still here. So that's all good. I'm at the end. But, you know, to take it full circle on that, my own story in that was, and I would tell kids, you know, I can specifically remember
the conference meet in cross country my sophomore year where I stepped off the course, where my knee hurt and I was done and I stepped off the course. And I told them, I regret that decision. I would rather limped across the line because I quit, and I said, so I want to help you to get through whatever it is to get you that. I just think that athletics, regardless of whether it's cross country or track or basketball or lacrosse or whatever it might be, it's valuable. And especially when you're recruiting a private school, you have to argue it's worth X number of dollars a year more than whatever to be an athlete. And I would, up until the last couple of years, I could say, yeah, it was.
Right.
And it became a lot harder when it got more expensive.
I stepped off the course one time and I don't regret it. We were at a home meet. This is high school. I didn't run college. I'm not as good as you fancy people. I wasn't even good enough to be on my high school team. So that's just a lot right there. So I was a hurdler, a really, really bad hurdler. I 50% blame the coaches because they didn't know what they were doing, but I also 50% blame my genetics. I wasn't going to get there. So we have a home meet and there is 25 hurdlers. So it's a pretty big meet actually for us. There's there's 3 heats of 8 for the hurdles, but the last heat actually is a heat of 9 because there's the odd person, right? And so they had lane 9 set up. There's a home meet. This is my home track, but lane 9 was just full of rain puddles. And coach put me in lane 9 and I was mad. And I remember we had a really good athlete who ended up being a state champ in the mile the next year, ran for Georgia Tech. So he was, he's one of you guys that run in college and stuff. And I told him, I was like, even he was like, why are you in lane? It's our track. Like, you ain't got to be in lane 4, but what you doing in lane 9? And I was like, I'm going to send a message. And so gun goes off, I take off and my steps were off. I didn't hit, I didn't get the hurdle one. I stepped up because I was on lane 9. So I just stepped off the track. Yeah. Coach didn't care either. There was no, everybody listening right now is like, oh man, if my kid did that, I would just blister them. They would be, punished, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I don't even know if coach knew I did it. Like I was only kind of sending the message to like my buddy on the team. Like no one else even cared. Yeah. But I don't regret that at all because it was my home meet. Stick me in lane 1, man. Don't put me in lane 9. So where are we in regards to full-time coaching at Franklin? You're now a coach.
Yeah. So by then I was I was head track, but still part-time. And we had just
that's right, because you're working at the city.
Doing facilities. But we're just getting ready to hire a new football coach. And I remember sitting down at my computer at home, logging on to AOL. So the bong 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 bong, whatever.
You just alienated 50% of the listeners. They're like AOL.
It's great. Well, look it up because you can find it. And then it probably has the sound that goes with it too, which should be everybody's ringtone anyway. So
we used to go to the grocery store and get free disc. Now, if you don't know what a disc is, you got to go, same thing, go look it up with AOL on it. That's how you got AOL. And you'd get mailed, like we had hundreds of these stinking discs. Yeah.
So I was logging on the computer to AOL to send an email to my athletic director to say, hey, if it helps you to hire for this head coach or for his assistant, his staff, I'd be more than happy to step down as the track coach in order to hire the right people. Because what I was finding was I couldn't recruit both. Like I had time to recruit one or the other. Cross country was easier for me to recruit. Track's hard to recruit because there's, 16 different disciplines you have to worry about without a facility. Cross country was easy, not easy, but it was easier.
Yeah, easier. Yeah.
So I literally was in the process of sending this email that I get an email from my AD that says not only so the new president came from a school that didn't have football, didn't have track. So he felt like those were easy numbers. So he said, so who's the best football recruiter in the state of Indiana? Oh, this guy down at this opposing school. Hire him. And he asked AD, well, who can recruit in track? We actually have the guy, but he's not full-time. Make him full-time.
Wow.
So he said, I need your resume, or I need your reasoning why you should be a full-time coach. I need it yesterday. And then so
any reservations from you with that, or it was like, oh, it's go time?
No, I knew.
Now you get to. I don't want to say you're officially a coach.
I mean, this was 8 years. 8 years of part-time coaching,
right?
So I was invested in this. By that point in time, on the the record board, I mean, you still went back to your NAIA days of having some scholarship kids,
Mm-hmm.
and then some stuff, you have your 10-8 hand time
Mm-hmm.
stuff that it's never going to go away because it's hand time and it can't, but like, but on the women's side, there were some very good athletes that had come through the NAIA days that did track, but not the depth of the guys. So like almost the entire women's board was our kids, like they were our generation.
Right.
And so I was invested, invest in
Mhm.
what was going on. And then knew, because the president had taught me, that I had his support.
Mhm.
The previous president had put the wheels in motion. But then a lot had changed. I hired an admissions director who was a big track guy, huge track guy.
Mm.
Hired a new football coach, and then a president that came from a school that didn't have track or football. He also helped real close to that time, if not that same year, the next year, started swimming at the college as well, because felt like that athletics had to be a huge part of recruiting.
Hmm.
So that's when it became real.
So what year? It became real. What year was this?
I don't even remember.
Yeah.
So let's just say it'll be 4.
Yeah, because you're already there for 8 years. It's kind of hard to find.
2002-ish or
yeah,
something like that.
It's hard to find a delineation when you're like, well, I was already there for 8 years. Right. Yeah. So 2002. So now you're a full-fledged program, you got. Do you have any kind of staff at that point? Or do you still interns and things like that?
Yeah. So
any football coaches come over to coach?
No. So we still had. In fact, I remember I got hired in July was the start of the budget year, and I got hired in July and had no clue what to do. Like, what do you do in July? Like, I'm sitting in the office and I'm like I've never done anything in July before. So I'm just reading books and then a buddy of mine called me and said, hey, I'm going down this camp in Southern Indiana. My car's busted. Can you drive me down? And then we'll stay for a couple of days. And I asked my AD, and he goes, that's what you do in July.
You're like, oh, this is what you do.
So went down at Terry Brom's camp. That was my first year going down there, and then went down ever since. So ever since after that. But trying to figure out what it looked like. And then we had, we had this intern, and it could be like, that's when the shift make the shift. They'd always been distance kids. But now, since I was full-time, I could commit more to that. That was my background. So then that intern could be something else if I needed it to be.
Right.
But again, from the get-go, like very early on, I had a guy that was an All-American at Anderson that was doing some grad work at Butler. Said, hey, Paul, do you want me to do hurdles for you? Yeah. How about that?
Sure do.
And then we had some local guys that were good. Some of my alums came back around. So I had a great vault coach for several years. Really early on, I had a guy come up to me at a meet, and he says, I said, hey, I'm a Franklin alum, live there in town, coached a lot of high school track back in the day. You got a good jumper. I'd like to invest some time in him. And I'm like, okay, who are you? And he tells me his name. I'm like, name sounds familiar. So I go back and I start looking and digging. So he was the only high school coach in Indiana at the time to coach 3 7-foot high jumpers. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I brought him on, and he was also
you did.
he was also a master's thrower as well. So he'd coach anything, but he'd beat me to the track every day. He'd come out early to throw, and then he coached vault. And that was right when he got hired. It was right when women's pole vault came to NCAA.
Oh yeah.
So he was our vault coach, and then our long jump and triple jump coach. And so he was with me for 10 years before he got old enough that he just couldn't do it anymore. And then he passed away not too long after that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was, and just one of the best there was. So it was a good one.
So if we say 02 was the start of the full time, how many years did you spend at Franklin?
22 total. So 14 full time.
14, so through 16. So talk to us about, math is hard. Remember, I'm from Alabama.
You may be right. I saw 17 was it would have been fall 16 is when I resigned.
What were some of the highlights over, a decade and a half is a long time.
In case you guys aren't aware, so the way this works, you get no preempt at all as to what was going to go on. There's no, here's a list of questions. Here's a list of questions that we might go over. So in my head, I'm trying to figure out what might be the ones that go on. This happened to be one of them. So I got one. That's the only one I've got so far, I think, but I got that one. But you get no planning on. But yeah, the easy answers would be like, again, I was in a conference with some really dominant teams. So we only won a couple
So
conference
tell some of
championships.
those teams. Let's
Rose
get kind of
Hallman
a,
is
yeah,
incredible.
right. Okay.
Manchester had been really
Right.
good. And when I first started coaching, I would have been Wabash, Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Anderson hadn't lost a cross country championship in forever.
Right.
Wabash was a top 3 team in the nation for a while. Top 3, yeah. And so we had some really good. Rose Hallman is on a tear with track, but to win, so we won we won a couple cross country titles. We won a track title on the women's side, and those are the easy ones to point at. We won an individual. We had an individual win the 800. And that was the only one in school history. So that's obviously one that you're like, yeah. But then again, going back to the whole thing, it's still life lessons. So the highlights still come in. The weddings that you're asked to be a part of, a funeral, which was a weird one, but still,
right.
And then just being part of their lives afterwards and around that, to see them coach later. To have them come on your staff, I think is a cool thing,
So you've even talking about those weddings, like you've officiated, right? Yeah. Now that's an honor, right? It's, I mean, it's a heck of an honor to get invited to a former athlete's wedding. I mean, that's a big deal. Like, you mean so much to their life, and maybe even you knew both, the groom and the bride, and sometimes, right? Like, that's huge. Like, period, stop right there. That's huge. When you get asked to be what do you call it, an officiant? That seems to be like a, just another.
Yeah, it's humbling.
Yeah,
I mean, humbling, and of course a lot of pressure as well. I mean, honestly, probably the thing I disliked most about coaching was our awards banquet at the end of the year. Very early on as a coach, I didn't write everything out. I just kind of had highlights. I was a former pastor. I used to talk in front of a pulpit, and I missed a senior. Like, I told funny stories at the beginning of it, and then I come back and get serious and would talk about how much I appreciate him or whatever. And I missed a guy.
Oh no.
And I remember his dad came up to me, gigantic man, this big man. He's like, never been so disappointed in a person in my entire life. And you just sunk. So after that, I would type everything out and I would read it. And they make fun of me because I would read it because I didn't want to miss anything.
Right.
But that was always my fear, is I would misstate something, or, I mean, this is, especially for some of these parents, this was their highlight.
Right.
And a way for them to have closure. These, we always laugh, and you've been there as a coach, if they started when their kid was, say, 4th grade, and now they're 22 or 23, they have
this is it for them.
They have worse withdrawal
than
kids do.
Right.
The athlete does.
Right.
I mean, the families, the friendships they've joined with other parents, that's a cool part of, the whole coaching thing as well. But yeah, so to do the banquet was something, but then to be asked to a wedding, you're like, oh crap. Like, like, people did you type it out and read?
Always. Even for the wedding?
Most of it.
Yeah. Is that right?
Except for stories. Like, stories, it would be okay to kind of just, and some of them expected that. They're like, okay, coach, we expect you. Well, even like the funeral I did, the girl was a tragic, died young, and she had some very funny stories, and her mom was like, Paul, we expect you to tell that. And I said, like, that's, I mean, this girl was a 4.0 veterinarian science, and just had some very gullible things about her. And her mom was like, you have to tell that. I said, like, seriously? And she's like, oh yeah, you got to. Like, okay. That probably one of the hardest things I ever did. But again, I think doing a funeral is never a highlight, but it is I guess maybe a monument. When they say, okay, here are the things that the foundation of who made me who I am. That would be one of them for sure.
So if you're listening, you couldn't see it, but like when Paul talked about missing that athlete, the name, like, and the parent comes up, it just, you did this feature of like your heart sinking, and you could see it in your face, like, of all the things, like, it just, and you would not want that to happen. Right. So you can see the level of care and love and trust that you have with your athletes when you were coaching. If you don't mind, because I know a little bit about this story of this young lady that passed away, and the cool thing from my knowledge of the story, is the foundation and the cross country race, I think.
Oh,
do you mind sharing? Because it was
that's a different one, but yeah,
that was the one with
Wilmington.
That was that really, when you told me about that a couple of years ago, that really, Like that struck at me at the heart of coaching. The heart of coaching is not that 800-meter girl who won the national title. It's awesome. There's a plaque somewhere and she's telling her kids that, I'm sure, at some point, right? That's awesome. Very few get to do that. But we all get to, if we're doing it right, establish relationships, and maybe sometimes lifelong relationships. And even if they're not lifelong relationships, they're impactful relationships. You have a kid for a year or 4 years, or if you get to have them for longer through coaching with them and things like that, like you really, like that's your opportunity, right? That's your opportunity to make positive influence right where your 2 feet are, right there in Franklin, Indiana, right? And through this story that I hope maybe you'll share some point of, you got to share this with another coach as well, who I think would have very similar story right now in regards to his love, knowing him this much. You know, the love and care of, like,
we just had a very similar conversation probably 10 days ago. Just about the love for coaching.
What can you tell us about that?
So, you know, it's basically your coach's worst nightmare. You know, one of those things where we were hosting our home meet. It's always Labor Day weekend. There have been years where it was hotter than Hades, and you're always like, okay, you're gun shy of what might go on. This happened to be a day where it wasn't like that necessarily. And a young lady, Jenna Parlett from Wilmington, she's winning the race. I'm about 200 meters out from the finish. I've got a grove of trees kind of between me and the finish line, and she made a wrong turn, and she comes by me, and she's got that ticked off, you know, I'm with the eyes that can look right through you look. And she's like, where do I go from here? You know? And I said, you're 200 meters out, just, you're going to make it in. And then didn't think anything about it, saw the ambulance come up later, which is not uncommon. You know, it's hot, people are going down. And I wait until the very trail cart, my daughter, I think, is on the trail cart, and she comes around. She's like, Dad, I think something's really wrong. And so go up, and they're like, yeah, she had passed out, had a seizure, and we're taking her to the hospital. So, okay. So, and Wilmington is about a little over 2 hours, I think, from Franklin. And they're in a bus, and, and he's got his, Coach Combs has his 11-year-old son with him. I think he was 11 at the time. So he's got his son with him. He's like, I don't know what to, they didn't drive a separate vehicle. They don't know what to do, I said, well, so we'll go to the hospital and meet up. So I didn't plan on that. We always had a cookout afterwards for my family. So for our kids. So I'm driving the cookout, and I get a call and said, hey, you probably need to go to the hospital. Like, we don't have a administrator available. So will you be our administrator? Go look? Right. So I go, and doctor comes out and says, hey, we're going to transport her to Indy, but we're okay with things. Okay. And so the coach is like, well, I'm going to go ahead and take off. So that's fine. We'll let you know what's going on. That's against Labor Day weekend. So, you got stuff going on. So they go up on Saturday, and then I get a call later that it may be more severe than what we think it is. She had a history of like she had a pacemaker put in at one point in time in her life. She was a potential D1 athlete that had some health issues, like had I think there were 2 different times in her young career where she had to have her heart restarted while she was running. And so everybody kind of pulled out, we don't want her. And Coach Combs like, I say, what a tough athlete, because she won the race. I mean, so her grandpa had come up with this saying. It was you run with your legs, but you win with your heart. And so that was kind of their thing, a play on the fact that she kind of had a pacemaker. So that Monday, then almost my entire team came up to the hospital that day, just to visit and to talk to them and all. And I didn't know the Parlett family at all. Later, I found out that Jenna was also anemic. And sometimes it bothered her to ride the bus. She would get sick just riding the bus. So a lot of meets, they would come over early. They'd come up the night before and spend the night, just for her. And since then, I'm very close to the Parlett family. Right. Lisa's probably about my age, I would guess. But when she hugs you, you feel like you're 5. You just kind of melt. But we definitely consider it a blessing that we were able to be there. In Wilmington's place for a little bit until they were able to come back over and do everything as well. I think Jenna then passed away on that Tuesday, as Wilmington was on their way over, I believe. And so it was start of the year. Labor Day. Coach's worst nightmare, and the bond that formed between, again, Wilmington wasn't our conference anymore. We see them a lot, but it's not like you get to know kids necessarily. But the bond between the two teams became really strong, and our kids fundraised for some stuff for the Jenna Foundation. So their home meet became the hashtag Jenna Strong Race. And,
that's it. Yep.
and which is, you can see it on social media. It's pretty big. And then just being a part of that over the time. And, at the time I was on the NCAA committee. And I can remember I went to a conference in Indy, leadership conference, and it was during the season. I was it would have been after the season, maybe. I was kind of just still fried. Normally I'm not one to sit at an empty table, but I was like, hey, I'm just going to go and soak this thing in. So I sit at this empty table. The guy sits next to me. And I'm like, oh, I don't really want to talk to anybody. And I said, well, I'm Paul Sargent from Franklin. He goes, well, he's the president of Wilmington. So we just went out in the hallway and cried together.
Oh man.
But again, those are things that you never wish on another coach,
right?
Obviously. But even Coach Combs will tell you the things that came out of that at Wilmington. They're working towards the indoor facility. They've got a lot of other things change as a result of that. Some kids that are very good coaches now. That's part of their legacy. And that's neat to see. That's really, really neat to see overall.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm glad you brought that last part of it, because that was the whole part for me on this. I appreciate, you being vulnerable and talking about a very personal and a very tough situation, right? I mean, these are real things. These are what coaches go through. It is not always. In fact, it's majorly, like you mentioned earlier, not the X's and O's. It is the people that you're dealing with. And through tragedy, great things can happen. And I love the Jenna Strong. I love what they're doing. I love that you're still a part of it. I love that you bonded with the family. I mean, that's what life is about. And so this is just an extension of life through the sport of cross country, specifically here.
Yeah. It's neat to see when the anniversary rolls around and folks are posting different things about just the different differences it made, and the people that were impacted by that.
Right.
It's kind of a neat legacy. My son will always, hey, when's the meet? And, we go say hi to Lisa, and he wasn't on the squad then. He was just around it, but he's not going to miss it, yeah, that's good.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
That's a tough one.
And you're right. You got no preparation, man. That's exactly right. That's
that was when you talked about things that you said, oh, if you don't want to go there, don't go there.
Yeah.
That was when I thought I would just avoid.
Yeah.
You put me on the spot.
Well,
so I did anyway.
you got the get out of jail free card anytime. You know that. So let's transition a little bit. Let's talk about something happier.
Sure.
Although that was a happy ending in the sense of it affected a lot of people's lives positively. That was not in vain what happened. So love Jenna and what she's done for people.
It's a hard thing to do as a coach.
Absolutely.
But every now and then you get a chance to see the big picture.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about big picture, because you got to do something at Franklin that a lot of coaches don't necessarily get to do in their career. You got a whole new facility, and you got to be like really involved. I've got this article that I wrote on LinkedIn that says, congratulations, you're getting a new facility. Now what? And basically, let me give you the whole stunner of the article. It's about you as the coach. You need to be involved. It's sad and frustrating that we'll have these new facilities announced, and while they're designing it, the people that are going to be on there on a daily basis, the coaches and the coaching staff, don't get asked anything. And that's how you see vault boxes in the wrong places and steeplechases in the wrong places, et cetera. Talk to us about that process for you at Franklin when it was announced you're getting a new track and you're actually going to be involved in the design.
Yeah. So it was actually a weird dynamic in that our president told me, hey, talk to board trustees, we're moving towards a track. And so I began to tell recruits. And I get called in the office, and the AD is like, what are you doing? I said, I'm telling recruits we're getting a track. And he's like, you need to shut your mouth. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you just need to shut your mouth. And what I didn't realize is we had bought 28 acres or something, but we're in negotiations for like another 100 something. And so the whole idea was to keep it down low so they get these other, because the college had been landlocked for years. And so they had bought this land to be able to move tennis, flip-flop baseball, put softball, never had their own facility. And then for track to have our own facility as well. And then for practice fields, you didn't have any of that. So, and it went into compass with turf for the football field, lights for the first time. So it all
Wow.
became this big entity together.
Yeah.
So it went from being we thought it was going to happen tomorrow to like 6 years later or
Yeah.
whatever it kind of happened.
Pretty typical,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in between there, you get a chance to kind of think things through. What do you want it to look like? What is it? And what do you want to sacrifice? Like I
Mm.
remember Larry Maddox. So not only was Larry a mentor to me, Larry was also a guild dealer.
Mm-hmm.
So he was my guy. Like I didn't know javelin, I didn't know hammer, I didn't know all these things I didn't know. So I'd say, hey, here, you've seen this kid throw, what I need to buy, and he would tell me what to buy. And so same thing with a track. He'd been part of Anderson's facility a couple of times. They moved things a couple of times. He'd been part. I said, what do I need to be doing here? And so he was very good about it. I said, what's a number for a track? So they gave me this number. I went to college, said, here's the number, and they 3/4 that at best. I was like, okay, here we go. So then having to think through what I really want. What is it you really want? So like in our case, we could have had a high school type track with a grandstand, or we could have the track surface I really wanted and then makeshift it, and so not makeshift it. I mean, it's unique, but it's, there's not too many facilities where you could latch team tents onto the backstretch towards like its own little, it's team camp bleachers basically is what it became. We didn't have a grandstand, which drives football people nuts,
Right.
It was just, it was, track exclusive. So no interior for soccer or anything like that. It was all right there. Our hammer cage was a little farther away. Not too bad. I mean, it was, but everything else was interior. So it was kind of set up, but all the things that go with that, and then the mistakes you make even in that, but to have somebody there to guide through that, and then to think about, what, the difference between 8-lane track and 9-lane track, as far as, again, I'd never, this would have been so the track's almost 10 years old. So I've been coaching for 15, 17 years and never hosted a meet before.
Right.
I hosted cross country, but that's a whole different ballgame
Right.
than track,
Yeah,
so
it's not the 3-ring circus.
yeah. So trying to figure out more than that. That's the crazy part. So there's a lot more rings than 3. So you're trying to figure out, what does this look like? What's 8 to 9-lane track? How does it set up? Can you reverse directions? Do you want to reverse directions? You're not going to have a grandstand. So how else can you make it towards spectator friendly? I didn't like places where our throwers were isolated. So how do you make it to where they're still the center of attention? And it went from, like I remember our very first meeting with the architect said, so, first question, practice track or competition track? And I looked at our idea. I said, we build them both because that'd be awesome.
Right.
Europe, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
I said, no, it's competition. And he goes, 6-lane or 8-lane? I said, or 9.
Yeah.
Right. He looks at me. I said, and he knew, you've dreamed about this,
right?
You dreamed about this. So, but even then, there were things that you thought you dreamed about, but you know.
So talk to us about those dreams in the way of process. So how did you tour other facilities? Did you call coaches up and say, hey, what would you do differently? What was your process to learn what Franklin's?
A lot of it was, I like a facility in Indiana that I think that I got to see mature and grow into something really special was Indiana Wesleyan. Indiana Wesleyan went from being a track with no grandstands to having some permanent bleachers to having a whole coaches area. Now they've made a bowl to where it's natural grass seating, which is kind of what I was trying to go for a little bit, which was awesome. Thinking about, again, Carroll Stadium and IPY, we couldn't do that, but there's some parts that are unique. Seeing that there's very few places that we have that are interior throws. Basically, no, I can't hardly even think of one because it's all football or soccer. So having that was different, trying to figure out what that looked like. User friendly wise, it doesn't get much easier than IU. IU just has a great layout. So what does that look like? That part of it. So yeah, a lot of conversation. And again, we leaned on Larry very heavily. Like he became that resource for us. And of course, that meant in turn leaning on Gil really kind of at that point in time. We kind of had. We weren't sure, it became a financial thing, but I remember coming over here and meeting with you and bringing our vice president over just to chat about it. And she was definitely not a track person. She was, IT was her background, but to come over and to be bored to tears as we toured the facility and stuff. And I told her at some point in time, I'll go to some geek.
Right. It's some IT thing. Yeah.
But to see that part of it, that, okay, you're local, realistically, your family. I mean, with Coach Maddox would say, their family, I took that as word, that what we needed was there. And then to have him available as he was just beginning to transition out of coaching at that point in time, to have him available to know that, that he could help me with assembly or all the logistics that I had no idea what that looked like, to save money on. Like I remember we got stuff delivered in the fall before we started in the spring because it would save us a ton of money to do it that way. So we did, the in-ground stuff went in, but then all the other stuff would just sit out there.
Right.
But yeah, it was, and then the track surface was a whole different, that's for those that have gone through that, I know people that purposely have avoided going to, the coaches association on years where they're going to remodel or something because they don't want to have to deal with. And again, the track surface guys they have a job to do. I get it, but it can be overwhelming. It really can, especially when you're new to it, like I was. I was so new to it that there's great surfaces out there. So what did that look like? And trying to figure out what we could afford, what we couldn't afford. There's so many levels of different things. So that was a challenge for us overall. And seeing a different side of it, was unique.
So what was it like? You said this took about 6 years, and you go from, hey, be quiet to doing research on products, what's going to fit and where, so the layout of the track, what surface are we going to go with, which is obviously an important part because it's a big part of the facility. And then it's grand opening day. So what was it like to see the culmination of all of the work and the years?
Well, I'll backtrack a little bit. So, one of the things that kind of came out of this is I'll just let you know a couple good mistakes that we made. So we talked about what to fill in the interior with, and they're like, we can bring in this great topsoil and great grass. I'm like, nope. I'm like, why not? I said, it's going to catch discus and it's going to catch javelins. If we put good grass in there, that means everybody and their mom's going to come out here and want to play on my infield, and we're not going to do it. So we did not put in real. I mean, it grew grass, but it was a lot of clay and just, it was, what the other part that I wanted was not the steeple area. I wanted a big berm, so everybody could.
I remember something about a berm. Yep.
So we would go out every day, literally every day while they're building this thing. And I would take a wind gauge out and put it on, okay, where are we at? Where's the wind coming from? Let's see what this is going to look like at different times of the day. But so they start, we're sitting there and they start building up the track. And it's like a good 5 feet. No, I take it the other way around. They build this berm, and I wanted a 7-foot high berm by 7 foot wide that you could get up on top and look down in the steeple area, and it would be, all the way around the turn. Plus, we plant trees on to be a wind block for the wind coming through there. We had all planned out. So they build this berm. Well, then they build the road behind the berm, and the road keeps coming up. I'm like, okay, well, it's not 7 feet from the road, but it's still 7 feet from the track.
Right.
So then they start building the track, So it's about 2 feet higher at most than the track now. And I went to the general contractor. I'm like, hey, so what's this? And he goes, well, you 7 feet higher from base, right?
Oh,
but
Lord.
I didn't know. Like I didn't know how to communicate that.
Right.
No, 7 feet higher than
wherever the track ended up. Right.
Well, so he went 7 feet higher from base. So we have all this dirt that, so that was, but then again, so we got this interior. So the first 2 times we try to host, the first time we don't even get started. It gets lightninged out.
Oh no.
We don't even get, like, I think we were 4 laps into a 10K.
Here's your new track. Go home.
And the lightning strikes, and we're all the buses are out there, and we, the second time then we're having our conference meet. So we're supposed to host the inaugural Indiana D3 championship meet. So it gets lightninged out. Then we host our conference meet. So I get, thrown the wolves right off the bat.
Yeah.
I would be completely negligent if I didn't circle back around to mentors. Larry Cole at Rose-Hulman is the best meet director I've ever been around.
Is that right?
When we got ready to do this kind of stuff, he was the guy that's like, this is how you host a meet, and so different mentor, a different way. So we were
still in your conference.
Yeah, still in our conference.
So he's like, hey man, let's walk through this.
Drilled me.
Yeah.
Again, old time football coach, didn't have a grandstand, can't be a good track, that kind of thing. But really designed it not just to be a host, but if you're gonna host a conference championship, it needs to be like this. So we brought in so much portable bleachers, and we had all this going on. And so it was cool that night. And we get Friday night, and it's raining, but it's not terrible. We get kind of Friday night out of the way, and but it's cold. And our steeple pit, you had to get into to pop the drain because the suction would hold it on there. So Eric Kramer, my assistant coach, and it was cold that night. And I said, are you going in? He's like, do we have to? I said, nah, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal.
He's like, do we have to?
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. Well, then that next day we get like the heavens open and we get like 2 inches of rain in an hour. Nobody gives you a owner's manual on their track, right? They don't say, here's the owner's manual.
Right.
So it floods, like the whole thing's underwater,
Right.
completely underwater. The whole infield is completely underwater. Plus, it's not going to drain because we didn't put good grass in because I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to be good grass.
Right.
And I didn't put any, like, and up until that time, right after we built the track, we had a drought. So it was hard as a rock anyway. And I didn't put any sprinkler heads out there because one of the things that I'd seen too often was, all it takes is one sprinkler head to get knocked out loose and nobody catches it and it shoots in the middle of the track for a day and then the track's ruined. I didn't see any reason to have sprinklers out there because, we're throwing on it. It's not like we're trying to do wind sprints or something, So it's hard as a rock, then it's underwater. And so, and we're out there with squeegees and my AD is also our basketball coach. So he comes out and I said, do you do this a lot? I mean, do you take a mop and go out and get ready for basketball games? And he just walked away. Like, it's like,
we unfortunately all know that answer. Yeah.
So, but every coach in the conference has a squeegee and we're pushing everything towards the drain. Nothing's going on. And it's like, oh gosh.
Man.
So we get the conference meets over and I go to our facilities guy and say, hey, have you been like checking the drains on this, like the filters? And he's like, what are you talking about? Well, I said, it's got that tool that you pop that up. And he goes, there's no tool, Paul. I said, no, it's got the little, and it's how the little, it's your drains. When Gil used to have the drains, it's got that little piece that looks like you have a tool that you really don't have a tool for, which I didn't know. Thought you had to have a tool. So no, they just pull right up. So he thought I was checking the filters. I thought they were checking the filters. We pull the filters up, they're full. They're completely full of everything. So like mice and then stuff from like when when they pour the surface down, they put all that foam around when they make the slits. All that foam was down in there.
Wow.
What they also didn't tell you is that and everybody hear this, most of your drainage from a track comes to the steeplechase pit, either through actually draining through the steeplechase pit or the air it creates to allow it all to drain. When your steeplechase pit's full and the drain's not open, it won't drain. It just stays suctioned.
Right.
Found that out the hard way. So yeah, so it was the highlight of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was nuts. It was nuts. And it later we hosted, it was wonderful.
I was gonna say, any thought like, oh man, if we just didn't have a facility, we wouldn't have to worry about this stuff.
You can plan all you want to. That's another part about life. You can plan all you want to, and then when it rains, it rains. It is what it is.
That's really good. Real rain or other things.
It is what it is. But we designed some unique things out there. Like I made I remember when the guy was putting down the lines, he's like, this takeoff board's like 3 foot from the sand. Who does that? What idiot does that? I said, that'd be me. And he's like, why? And in my head, I said, I want little kids to be able to jump out here. Like I want them to be able to not have to run up the end. What I didn't realize, I had no knowledge. I wasn't real involved in USATF at the time. I'd kind of grown into that about that time. And we hosted a masters meet, and this 70-year-old guy comes out and he's like, Coach, I haven't jumped off a real board in 25 years.
Oh, always a tape.
Because it's always high school. And it's 9 feet or whatever from the sand.
Right.
I jump 10 feet and I can't. Now at 70, he jumps whatever, 5 feet or whatever. Right. It's like I can't ever hit. So I always have to run that because I haven't jumped off a real board in 20 some years. And that was a highlight for me. It was like, we did something that benefits the sport,
right?
Not just the college kids.
That's cool.
So
wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. That's a unique story. As you look at designing a new facility, first of all, get it out of your head that you're ever going to think of everything.
Oh no,
you'll
make a mistake.
You just do what you can. As long as you're doing your research, right? Like calling other coaches, hey, what would you have done differently? Things like that. That I think is the most important. That's where I've seen facilities have the most success when they open up. It's people who did their due diligence. The ones that get in trouble are the ones that are just done by an architect and an AD.
Yep.
And then the coach comes in and is like,
same mistakes. Like we did interior discus. And the AD or the architect showed me, here's where your sector line is going to be for discus. It's going to be fine. Well, we can move long jump, triple jump outside the track, like it is at IU. No, it's going to be fine right there. No, it's not. If you hook a discus, it's going to fly down the runway.
Right.
Or if you have a stud master's level thrower and he can throw it onto the pole vault pit, there were things that you can't plan for. You're thinking about what happens when that 70-meter guy comes into your facility.
Right. Yeah. Get the idea of the perfect facility out of your head.
Yeah,
there is not one
gonna happen.
for
there
any
were a lot of
level.
A lot of special things in that, that and then just to be able to to have a place called home, was good.
Mm.
Now, again, the whole ins and outs, it was zoned farm ground. So, which meant that we couldn't have a storage building. So it couldn't be any more than 10 by 10. So imagine trying
Oh,
to do track storage with no more than a 10 by 10.
huh.
It also was an existing cornfield. So the mice, that's still home for them.
Mhm.
So when they don't have corn anymore, guess what they like to go
Yeah,
into?
pits, baby. Yeah.
Oh gosh, we went through a lot of different repair on pits and stuff. Now
Wow.
only on the pole vault because it was immediate next to the grass. The high jumps sit far enough inside the D that we didn't have to worry about. Apparently they don't like track surface, which was good to know later on in life. Yeah. So it's just a lot of ins and outs, the whole thing. The one thing I give Larry Maddox grief over a ton was he said he recommended that we pay someone to put the hammer cage up, but
Mm,
didn't like highly recommend.
mm,
And that was the biggest thing that
mm,
I've ever. I mean, we got it together, but our
mhm.
facilities guys, we had to hire a crane and all this kind of
Right.
stuff. And
Yeah.
I will don't feel like that's something you ever want to do on your own. Pay someone to do it.
So as we start wrapping up a little bit here today, Paul, so as we look at today's title, it does not say Paul Sargent Franklin College. And we talked a little bit, we kind of did a little teaser at the beginning. So you now own your own business, kind of back to you were looking at the shoe store back in the day. Well, now you come full circle and you own your own business, Sargent Distribution, which means he's a dealer of ours. So he sells our equipment and some other equipments and stuff like that. So that means you had to get out of coaching.
Yep.
So walk us through what you can share with us of why and how'd you know and how did you get into owning your own dealership?
That's a tough one. I think the short answer would be, I mentioned before that we, had a president that kind of came in and said, okay, who can do this? And I was hired. That president was there for a long time, and then we got a new administration, and but it wasn't a good mesh. It really wasn't a good mesh. Um, Again, as I mentioned earlier, very seldom do we get to see the big picture. The big picture would be that it was probably time, but very few coaches see that.
Oh, right.
It was time for a change in some sort, whether or not that meant that I moved to different, selfishly, I'd love to say, I could have been a director rather than a head coach. We could have been creative with it, but it was probably time. It was time to make a change of some sort. And again, in the big picture, we had some family issues go on a couple of years later where I could have never supported my family in the way I needed to had I been a coach. Never. I mean, the hours, the availability that you have to have as a coach, but to be able to a lot of what I do now, I can do online. I don't have to be. I like to go visits, but I don't have to.
Right.
So I was able to spend some time with my granddaughter who has some special needs, and those are things you could never do as a coach. Not without taking a sabbatical or something else.
Right.
So yeah, so transitioned out of coaching. Coach Maddox, when he was at Anderson, kind of felt the same way a little bit. I think that they transitioned, but wasn't ready for it yet. And so he immediately started calling me, we was a mentor anyway, but he called, Paul, you doing okay? Paul, you doing okay? And then about a month after being out of coaching, he just said, hey, why don't you and your wife meet us on the north side of Indy, and I'll bring Joanne down and we'll have dinner and chat about a few things. I'm like, okay, I mean, I'll take a meal. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So met him and I think coach was 70 something at that point in time and had retired from coaching, but not required from L&J Distributors. Is that right? Distributors. I always get to L&J. And so Larry and Joanne Distributors. So they had started this business when he was a college coach, maybe even a high school coach, maybe before then. And had sold things that he made, like he was making stuff back in the day, the track speed development equipment and that kind of stuff, and ended up being a gill dealer, among with a multitude of other things, as we know, but was ready to really retire.
Right.
And so provided the opportunity for me to kind of just take over his clientele and to move in with that. So came over, met with you, and I, again, was just affirmed that Gil's a family. That's a good thing, and it worked out well to be able to do what I do.
So help us understand, our 99.9% of all of our guests here on the podcast are current track coaches, right? And so we kind of know what that means as far as coaching and other things like that. What does it mean to be a dealer? Someone's listening right now going, what does that even mean, Paul?
Gosh, I wish I knew at times, I guess. So basically for the most part, Gil is not territorial, but for the most part, I'm going to deal with the folks I know. So it's Indiana. Now, again, through coaching, I was on the D3 national committee or championship committee, so I know other folks. So I may deal with others that are outside that circle. Um, but I'm having, either high school coaches or middle school coaches or ADs or college coaches, not a lot of college ADs necessarily, but they're going to call for equipment.
Mhm.
And then uh, Gil is still, and I'm gonna call it old school, I think, in their way. Most of business has moved to, almost all online.
Mhm.
And Gil still has a wonderful niche to say, if you're, say you're in Indiana somewhere and you call Mike and say, I'm looking for a discus cage. He's going to say, okay, here's my quote, but let me know. I also want you to let you know we've got a local guy
Mhm.
that could maybe help service you just because he's closer and,
Mhm.
and and help you with some pricing on stuff as well. And so that's where it kind of works out. And I that's unique in today's world.
Mhm.
I love it because it helps my business overall. And then again, I'm fortunate that for me, I'm 2 hours away, and so I do a lot of my own deliveries and pickups and stuff just because I can, and
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So, what is the value that you bring to selling the track equipment? So, the reason we go through dealers is because of the service and the
correct,
value that you provide. Talk about that, whether it's deliveries,
right,
consultation,
right.
that side of
But
the
you think about it as
business.
a coach, okay? So you would get that email at least once a week from a recruiting service, right? And it's all this blind calling. It's all people like you don't know this kid from Adam. All you got this list and or you got this list from admissions and it's 200 people long. But you want to get down at the kids that have actually responded to you or you've met, and these are your people.
Right.
Um, that's who I am. So like, Gil's list is thousands upon thousands. My list is hundreds upon hundreds.
Mhm.
And so it's a little bit more personalized. It's an understanding sometimes of facilities. So being able to, hey, I'm putting in this. Let me come up and look at it. And not to say that Gil wouldn't do that all the
Mhm.
time, but it's a lot more challenging in your schedule than it is, that would be in mine.
Right.
So there's some expertise in that. 22 years of
Mhm.
coaching,
Mhm.
designing your own facility, making mistakes in that facility, and then just again being able to much like Coach Maddox was to me back in the day. Hey, you see my kid throw, what would you recommend?
Mm.
Or or just some wisdom in that. Like we had a
Mhm.
we had a kid this year in Indiana that we knew at the high school level he was going to throw out of the landing area at the regional. And so I said, I don't know what he's throwing, but if he's throwing something that can get damaged, it's going to be illegal.
Mm.
So you have some junk thing to throw just to get him through to state meet.
Mm.
Those are the kind of things that you talk through later on.
Mhm.
Then again, for me, one of the things that has come up huge is shipping's expensive.
Mhm.
To ship a pole and the risk of as everybody knows that people don't understand our world,
Mhm.
and so the fact that you put it in a tube that says fragile doesn't stop some guy running a forklift
I
over
think
it.
it
And
motivates them
I don't
sometimes.
know, it's nuts. Or I mean, I don't know if for those are college coaches. I mean, you've seen what airlines do to try to get them under. I mean, they're bending those things, and it's crazy. And javelins are even worse. Because it's there's no flexibility in that.
Right. Yeah.
So what I try to provide is when I can is to help out in that way.
Mm.
I try to provide some shipping, so a chance just to come around and help out with that. Again, the things that we're budget conscious, we can't help but to be. There's very few of us that have that uh, limitless budget.
Mhm.
And so we need to be careful with those type of things. But to be able to just help with that, and then or if something comes up, the flip side of that would be if something comes up, how do I get that replaced? And
Right.
and again, that's where I think the Gill family comes in. It amazes me time and time again where, hey, we order this poll, and they're getting ready for their sectional, they're getting ready for their conference meet, and it's got a crack. It showed
Right.
up with a crack. What can
Right.
we do? Well, we're gonna, and they make good on those type things.
So you mentioned I'm gonna call it your motto when you were coaching was teaching life lessons through the avenue of athletics.
Hmm.
How does that translate? Obviously, it's gonna be a little different,
Hmm.
but how does that translate now into this role of serving coaches versus serving athletes as a coach?
I haven't come up with the same. I struggle with this a lot because I'm one of those guys that does the yearly. I don't do well with goals.
Mhm.
But I do a yearly planning session
Mhm.
where I go away and kind of do all my stuff. I know when I have my saying, here's what I want to be as a father. Here's what I want to be as
Yeah.
a husband.
Mhm.
Now here's what I want to be as a grandparent.
Yeah.
Here's what want to be as a church member. But as a owner, I struggle with what to put down there.
Huh.
But the one word I always go back to is integrity.
Mm.
I don't I don't want to be a used car salesman.
Mhm.
And if you have integrity as a used car salesman, I apologize
Mhm.
altogether.
Yeah.
But I don't want to. I want to be honest. So
Yeah.
when I'm telling you, like today's world's a great example with COVID and post COVID. Availability of some things is a nightmare for everybody. I
Right.
mean, in any world you're in.
Mhm.
But you want to be honest to say, hey, we're looking 4 weeks. We're not looking tomorrow, that may not be the best option for you right
Mhm.
now. Or hey, you're going to spend more, but it's worth it.
Mhm.
It's worth it. Those are parts of it where I get a lot of that. And I did when I was, working the shoe store as well. They may not buy, but they're going to call for wisdom. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
we can't invoice for wisdom.
Yeah.
Not that I have a lot of that, but at least I give an opinion.
I was about to
I
say
guess maybe
I would owe more
maybe it's
than
more
I.
than an opinion than a wisdom, but whatever it might come in. Yeah, but there's part of that I think is important to go
Mhm.
back and just have integrity in what that looks like.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's a big part of what it's about, and which
Yeah.
is why I'm, for the most part, I'm Gill exclusive,
Mhm.
and I've chosen to be that way, maybe to a fault, but it's just I want to be able to. I don't want to have mixed loyalties.
Mhm.
That's just I can't imagine as a coach, if I was at IU and Purdue, and which one am I going to tell them to go to? They're both
Right.
great schools,
Right.
and so I would have to make them choose otherwise. So.
Well, I think first of all, I love that you believe that your word is integrity, because as the outside observer of you working with your customers and seeing your success that you've had, like that's the word, like that hits it
Good.
to a T. I've seen you and heard stories from your customers where it's like, yeah, he didn't want to sell me that. Like I thought I wanted that, but he talked to me about why that might not be a good idea for now, whether it was the athletics or the facility, the athlete or the facility, etc. Like you'll do some self-sacrificing for the greater good of the coach and the program than today's paycheck, today's invoice right now. So, and I think that's, that when we talked earlier about longevity, I think that's the key to longevity. That the used car salesman needs to get a sale today and then probably won't see you for, well, depending on the level of car you get, maybe a year, but 5 years, 10 years down the road, where if you're going to sell track equipment, boy, you're going to sell something to a coach and you're going to see them the next day.
Yeah.
Maybe literally the next day. And for sure that during the season, at some point, you've got to be able to look those men and women that you serve out there in the eye and know I did my best. I make mistakes.
Yeah.
But I did my best
I
and was
trust the
honest.
equipment. It may still fault,
Yep.
that pole still may snap.
Mhm.
You may have something else go on. You may get a rip or whatever it might be, but you trust the equipment.
Mhm.
And then you also, I think you admit it's not, there's no perfect science either. So I've made plenty of mistakes in this as well, to see what that's like as well, to be able to, okay, I messed this one up. This is not what you really needed. Let's go back and make it right now. What does
Right.
that look like?
Yeah, that's the key, right? Like I always talk to, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, Paul, humans build it, humans ship it, humans sell it, humans buy it, and we're fallible, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking for perfection, we're certainly not your company and we're certainly not your people. Here's the bad news. There isn't any company
correct
out there that are perfect. It's who stands behind it after the fact. And that's what you've done such a great job. How many years now as Sargent?
We're starting
Distribution?
5.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
from 0 to where you are today, my friend, you have served a lot of coaches and therefore a lot of athletes in what you've done in your day-to-day business, man. It's awesome.
It's good. It's a good way to, it's a good way to give back to the sport still, to stay involved. I think between that and, people ask about, do you miss the coaching group? And I said, that was my social group. And now the official group is my social group in a lot of ways, but it's still finding a way to give back and be part of the sport and be around it. And, that's ultimately extremely still important to me. And I'm still a sports guy, I'm still doing other stuff, but that's the love for sure.
Yeah. If you don't catch him at a track, he's going to be at a baseball game. And I am not a baseball guy. I'll live through you on the baseball side.
Yeah.
You do it and have a good time with that. Well, Paul, if someone is out there listening right now and they're looking for someone with integrity inside the track and field equipment world, et cetera, how might they get in touch with you? What's maybe the best routes?
I mean, you could call or email. If you just jump on the website, sargentdistribution.com. It's kind of long in there, but it's unique. So, and then it's got my email is just paul@sargentdistribution.com. And then it's got my phone number on there, and it is the one number I have. There's not more than one. So, you get a contact. But yeah, if you reach out and, this is a kind of a crazy time of year with traveling around a little bit, but I'll get back to the ASAP and kind of figure some things out.
Well, thank God for Google. So you see the podcast name right now, it's Paul Sargent. So if you just Google Paul Sargent and track equipment, that will bring up your website.
Yeah, don't read the other stuff, just the try.
Yeah.
You might find stuff on there you don't want. So just
go past the criminal records and the college day
whatever else
newspaper.
might come up. Yeah. There's some mullet pictures you probably don't want to see. So just skip over those.
And if you go on YouTube, you can see he does not have the mullet anymore. We're past those stages.
No. It's a good camera. You can't see the ball part on the back. So you don't have a mirror back there or anything. So it's good.
Well, Paul, man, thank you so much for your time today. I say this at the end of every one of our podcasts because it's the gospel truth here. Your time is one of the most important and valuable things that you can give us. And so to spend, an hour and a half with us today, just going through your story, man, just awesome. I mean, to hear the authenticity of why you actually coached. I mean, to do it for 8 years and not be a full time, you're either like you just love torture or you love the kids and the sport.
You're a little dim or
right. And you're a bright guy. So I know it's not that. It was all about the kids and the athletes and the program for you. And through your undergrad up to, all the way through retirement there of the school. I mean, that community meant and means something to you today. And it's quite evident.
Well, I appreciate the chance we get very few opportunities to see big picture, and opportunities like this are a good chance to kind of step back and go, oh, yeah, those things kind of fell in line. And then obviously through that, what'd you say, 15 years you've been here?
Yeah.
So almost that entire time, your friendship and your mentorship as well in the world of equipment, and then now just business and more than that now.
And you're still here.
Still here for some. Will be until they kick me out.
I was about to say until
they deny my face at the door when I try to come in. So,
that might happen the same day that it does for me. So as long as I'm here, you're here. All right. Well, thanks again, Paul, man. Really do appreciate your time and appreciate you guys being here today. We love bringing you coaches from around the world. And I thought Paul's story, not only through coaching and the things that he has been a part of and has built, but also his transition to a different part of this world inside of track and field, was important for us to share and kind of make sure you can see the big picture of everything that's out there in regards to the sport of track and field. So if you received value from today's episode, I'm going to go out on a limb and say someone else in your network might receive value. So share it on Twitter, TikTok. He didn't give his TikTok and his Snapchat, whatever. You can tell I'm not on those things. I'm sure he's a huge Snapchat guy, but make sure you share this episode on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, I don't know, smoke signals, whatever you crazy cats are doing these days, and help someone else receive value. And join us again next week. We're going to have another awesome person sitting in the chair. They probably won't be here in person, which it's always better when they're in person. You can look at someone in the eye and make them tell a story. It's stronger. So thanks again for being here today. Join us next week and we'll do it all over again. Have an awesome day.